Okay, Sonic 3D Blast is a game that I definitely didn't beat for the first time to make this video. Let's keep this short and sweet. We're gonna go in sequential order, we're taking all 3 acts into account, let's go. Also, since this is going to be so short, I'm also mentioning whether I prefer the Genesis or the Saturn version of the soundtracks. Firstly, Saturn title screen is better. First point goes to Saturn. The Green Hill of the game. It has great music that was used in a better level in Sonic Adventure. Aesthetically, it doesn't do anything interesting. This really is the first bargain brand Green Hill, and even with the game's design limitations due to the isometric perspective, the level design leaves a lot to be desired. The level is just big and flat. No gimmicks, no real obstacles besides enemies that you can barely see coming, but that's just the problem with the whole game, so that's not even unique to this one level. Honestly, one of the weakest first levels in a Sonic game period. It's not frustrating though, so I'll give it a C. Music-wise, this is the only tie. Act 1 obviously goes to the Genesis version, but Act 2 I gotta get to the Saturn. Act 1 on the Saturn is good, it's just not as iconic as the Genesis version, but Act 2 is a better remix of Act 1 on the Saturn than it is on the Genesis. You don't really think about Green Grove Act 2 Genesis. You just think of Green Grove as like a song. So yeah, they're tied. First of all, I just want to point out that this level is called Rusty Ruin, not Rusty Ruins. Like, so many videos on YouTube say Rusty Ruins. That's not what it says. You can read, I can read, it says Rusty Ruin. Anyway, man, I really wanted to like this level. It has my favorite music from both versions, but I can't say that it's better than Green Grove. Act 1 is, sure, but we'll get to Act 2. The best thing this stage has going for it is its aesthetic. I like the ruin setting, and the badniks here are all fun. You get Moonwalking Gator Boy, Prototype Crab, if you're playing the director's cut, which you absolutely should. Even Charmy's cousin Jeremy makes an appearance here. The spinny fans are a fun idea too, but okay, I can't beat around the bush. Act 2 sucks. Act 2 has one of the few tight platforming sections in the game. It is literally just one jump. But if you miss it, you have to walk all the way back to where you fell from. Okay, I'm just gonna stop this whole section right here. It turns out this spring right here just gets you over this whole pit. I don't know why I just didn't even try that. Like, I don't want people calling me out in the comments. This level is a D now. I still think it's probably the worst level in the game, but it's not as bad because this was a user error, and I can acknowledge that. That said though, the music is top notch. I love both versions, but I gotta give it to the Saturn on this one. It changes the tone to a much more mysterious kind of setting, and it's just so chill. It's one of my favorite Sonic songs in general, but too bad it's in the worst level in this game and one of my least favorite Sonic levels ever. As I alluded to in the opening, I've actually never beaten this game until I decided to make this video. The farthest I got as a kid was Rusty Ruin, so Spring Stadium and beyond are 100% new to me. Is it weird that I think this is the best level so far? The gimmick of this level being a bunch of springs and spikes fits both Sonic and the game's top-down perspective. Honestly, the weakest part about this level is the boss. Eggman sends out his wacky waving inflatable arm tube bot, and it forces you to fight the true villain of this game, Depth Perception. We met in the last level. This stage isn't better enough than Green Grove to get out of C tier for me, it's just a better C tier level. Musically, Saturn actually wins again. I wasn't super impressed with the Genesis version's main instrument since it was reused from Green Grove, so it just didn't land as well for me. The Saturn version, though, has a casino-like feel in Act 1, and it's really cool, very Casinopolis. But Act 2, as one amazing comment put it, you're not the clown, you're the entire circus. It is such a funny song, and it leaves way more of an impact than the lackluster Genesis version. This level actually surprised me with how good it was. Like the last couple of levels, the badniks are all funny little guys, but what really seals the deal for me in this level is that they're all placed in a way that makes so much more sense than any level before this point. In both acts, but especially Act 2, the enemies aren't out of the way. Act 2 is the best level in the whole game. Like, spoilers for the rest of the game, but it's true. If all the levels were designed like this, I'd probably like the game a lot more, but they aren't. This level gets an A tier though. Also, did you know that the freezing gimmick in Press Garden Act 2 was from this game? I knew Mania referenced pretty much every classic game, but I didn't think 3D Blast got referenced until I played this level and I got frozen, and I was like, that ice breaking sound sounds very familiar. And the gimmick was exactly the same, and I was like, well, this is just Press Garden. That's crazy. For the music, it's obviously the Genesis version. The Saturn version, again, isn't bad, but this one is just so iconic. It's so good, in fact, that they remixed it for Sonic Chronicles. And everyone loves that version. I was fully prepared to hate this level, but surprisingly, I think it's okay. I think my opinion would probably be different if I didn't have a fire shield, but I did. And you can too. They're all over the place in this level. With a fire shield, this is probably my second favorite level so far. It keeps enemy placement a bit more streamlined, just like Diamond Dust, just not as nice as Diamond Dust. The lava can also be a little annoying if you lose a flicky when you don't have a shield, because they like to just kind of jump around and that stuff. Like, I don't know why you're not getting burned. Like, what the heck? It's lava? You should be dead, bird. The boss is also a bit of a struggle until you remember that this is a boss in the classic Sonic game, so you can just brute force your way to victory with invincibility frames. I still think this level is a B though. Musically, this is the first one that doesn't leave much of an impression for either version. I like what the Saturn version is going for, but it feels a bit generic, so I'm gonna say that the Genesis wins this one. It's a bit more original. This is the only level in this game that I had completely forgot existed. Like I said, I haven't beaten this game until now, but I'd still heard of the level names of every other level here. Not this one though. I think I heard this song in a remix once, like a Sonic Mega Mix. Anyway, Act 1 of this level is okay, but Act 2 is a bit annoying. It has the same kind of tight platforming section that Rusty Ruin has, only there are more platforms to save you from a bad jump, and the slopes are less punishing in general than outright missing a platform. And something I didn't mention in the last couple of levels, Act 2 has needed you to bring flickies back to 3 rings, but I think the devs knew that this would be frustrating because you only need 2 giant rings in Act 2. It is still a C tier though. At least the boss of this level is better than Sonic CD's conveyor belt boss. At least he shoots you in this one. Musically, I was thinking the Genesis one won this one hands down. I do really like the melody, but then I heard the Saturn version and suddenly it became much closer. Why are both of these soundtracks so good? Why doesn't anyone talk more about the Saturn soundtrack? With that said, I do think I still have to give this one to the Genesis version because it's a bit more iconic, but just by a little bit. The main thing holding back the Saturn version for me is that the opening is so good, and then it goes in and you're like, all right, yeah, it's getting into the main melody, and then it just kind of stays there, and it doesn't ever loop back to how the opening is. Like, that doesn't really reference it at all. They're kind of like 2 separate pieces kind of stuck together. Well, we're already at the end. Both of these acts remove the flicky gimmick entirely. In Act 1, they're just trapped in pods, not badniks, and in Act 2, there are no flickies at all. This lets them put more enemies in the level, which is a fitting way to ramp up the difficulty. It's an okay final level. The boss is kind of annoying though, mainly because it doesn't telegraph what you're supposed to do very well. Basically, when each arm attacks, you hit the shoulder to do damage. It's not a bad boss, the level is a C. Musically, come on, the Genesis one wins this hands down. The Saturn version isn't bad, but it just doesn't hold a candle to the Genesis version here. Special stages. I wish I could play the Saturn ones because they look great and have the better song. The Genesis ones are bridges. D tier. The final fight is kinda lame. First of all, it's just called the final fight. There's not a name for this robot. None of them really have names in general. They usually don't, but the final fight, like, come on, they're Doomsday Zone. That's a cool name. The final fight is just kind of like, okay, yep, this sure is the last level. There's 5 phases and they each repeat once, and each phase boils down to just waiting for Eggman to make himself vulnerable. I've never been a huge fan of this kind of design. It's kind of the opposite side of the spectrum for regular classic Sonic boss fights. Usually you don't wait and then attack. You just attack and you just damage buffer through everything. But this is the exact opposite, where you are just standing here. You are waiting for attacks to end, and then you hit them when the vulnerability part happens, when you're able to play the game. The timing on some of the attacks is also pretty inconsistent, so actually dodging the attacks is less challenging and more annoying. Aesthetically and musically, the Genesis version is better than the Saturn version. I will say I like the aesthetics a lot in the Genesis version because it kind of feels like the little paths in Starlight Carnival. You know, the ones where they're like ethereal, you know? It really reminds me of Rainbow Road from Mario Kart 64, where it's just like a black sky and then it's got like the rainbow, or in this case, the light floor. And it's like abstract. It leaves a lot to imagination, but it also is just way more interesting than just metal base. How many Eggman bosses are metal bases? Come on. But if you've been keeping track, you will find that the Genesis version wins, just barely. Congratulations to our champion for being the better soundtrack to a subpar game. You love to see it, you earned it. But wait, I've just been informed that there's one last song to look at. The credits. And wouldn't you have it, the Saturn version, I think is just a little better. Like, okay, so I have a nostalgic feeling for the Genesis version of the credits because they used the opening of that for the Sonic Mania reveal. So that has like a place in my heart. But this version on the Saturn is just like, mwah, it is so good. Like, it's so corny, It's so cheesy. I love it. So then who wins though? Okay, I've also just been informed that the Saturn cheated because it had a couple of songs that weren't tied to stages, and that's how it won by, or even got this close by like technicality. So Genesis still wins. Yay. Thanks for watching. Be sure to do all the like and comment things that YouTube loves, and good night. Have a good day. Play Sonic. He likes to eat chili dogs. That's pretty cool, right?